Bob's Corner. Let us start by talking about the 5-second rule. A common misconception about the 5-second rule is that it goes into effect as soon as you start casting a spell, which is not true. The 5-second rule goes into effect as soon as you have finished a cast, which means that for 5 seconds after you've finished a cast, you will not regenerate any more mana. Everyone with mana has roughly 1% of their mana regenerating all of the time. This is what is known as base mana regeneration. This is cancelled out by the 5-second rule. During vanilla, all of your mana regenerated in chunks. That is what we call a tick. Every tick is on a 2-second interval. Priests regenerate their mana depending on their spirit and on their intellect. The formula for spirit regeneration is 13 plus S divided by 4. Or in normal words, that would be 13 plus a quarter of your spirit. They also regenerate mana depending on their intellect. Sadly, I could not find an exact formula for this, but the information I did gather says that intellect regeneration is based on the square root of your intellect. This means that the more intellect you get, the lower your regeneration increase per intellect point will be. We call this a diminishing return. With that being said, let us now start talking about talents. I will not be giving you a talent spec that you should be taking. I will, however, tell you that I have assumed that everyone specs into both meditation and improved healing. Meditation gives you 15% mana regeneration while casting, and improved healing reduces the cost of most of your heals by 15%. Without meditation and your tier 2 set, you will not have any spirit regeneration while casting, which means that me discussing how much mana you will regenerate while you are casting will not work, so therefore you have to spec into this talent. And if you do not have 3 out of 3 improved healing, the cost of your spells will be slightly higher, which means that the cost per second that I have calculated and that I'm showing later on in the video will not be correct. However, you can still use all of the video and everything about what you regenerate and how much. It will only be about your spells being slightly more expensive, so you will a little bit faster. With all that being said, let us now start talking about the math. So the spirit regeneration formula is 13 plus S divided by 4. That means that 13 is the base of your regeneration, S is the spirit of your character. So what it really means is that you have 13 plus a quarter of your spirit regenerating while you are not casting. And to calculate this, we first need to get a value for our S for our spirit. And I will be using an undead as a base for my video. A naked undead priest at level 60 has 130 spirit. So his regeneration rate would be 13 plus 130 divided by 4. 130 divided by 4 is 32.5. So 13 plus 32.5 equals 45.5. So this means that a naked undead priest regenerates 45.5 mana per tick. However, on gear there is also a thing known as mana per 5 second. So we need to convert this value into a mana per 5 second. So we do this by knowing that a tick is 2 seconds long, and if we want to get 2 seconds into 5 seconds, we simply multiply it by 2.5. So we take 45.5 multiplied by 2.5, and that equals to 113 plus 75. So we have a regeneration of 113.75 mana per 5 seconds. As we will also be casting for most of the time, we will need to calculate how much mana is regenerated while we are casting. With meditation, we have 15% of our mana regeneration lasting while casting. That means that we need to multiply this figure by 0.15. So 113.75 multiplied by 0.15 equals to 17.0625, and we'll round that down to 17. This means that a naked undead priest with 3 out of 3 into meditation has a casting spirit regeneration of 17 mana per 5 seconds. Now naturally we will not be playing the game naked, so therefore we need to put some gear onto our priest. And I have not taken the time to actually assimilate a best in slot gear, so I've just taken some stuff that you'll be wearing while you are level 60. And for that reason alone, I've taken the dungeon set and some offset pieces. I know that this is not the best stuff you should be having, but it is enough for me to get some stats that are roughly equal to what you should be having at this point. So with some gear on, our priest will have 269 spirit, 302 intellect, and 9 mana per 5 seconds. This means that we need to recalculate how much spirit regeneration we have, since we now have more spirit. So what we will be doing now is we will take 13 plus 269 divided by 4, and that means that our spirit regeneration while not casting is 80.25. We will now multiply that by 2.5, and we'll multiply that figure again by 0.15. This will give us a value of 30.09, and we will round that out to 30, which means that our spirit regeneration while casting is 30 MP5. We also have 9 MP5 on our gear, and this is giving us 39 mana per 5 seconds while casting, and we will have 209 mana per 5 seconds while we are not casting. This is why we calculate everything into MP5, so that we can put the value of MP5 on gear together with spirit, otherwise it is really hard to count this. As the game progresses, our gear will progress as well. And instead of just talking about how much we get into Molten Core and what we get out of that, and when we improve and we get our best in slot gear and all that, I will start talking about what happens when we get into Blackwing Lair. The tier 2 set for priests is really good, because the 3p set bonus, which you can get fairly early on, will allow you 15% of your mana to regenerate while you are casting. This is added on top of meditation to allow you 30% of your mana regeneration while casting. As this changes our formula for spirit regeneration while casting, we now can also add in the fact that intellect will also increase your mana regeneration. So the new formula looks a little bit differently, and it's a little bit scary, and this is what probably puts a lot of people off doing the math. The new formula is SR plus the square root of I times 2.5 times 0.3. I will be breaking this down as well, because it's not really all that scary and it's not really all that different. An important thing to keep in mind now is that this is where we're starting to get into the fact that we want to get a best in slot gear, but we should not be getting that straight away. Everyone wants to get the gear that we have in there, so therefore I've put together the stats that we will be expected to have in Blackwing Lair gear before we get the best in slot stuff. When wearing all of our tier 2 set, because it looks really cool, we'll have a spirit of 265, we will have 365 intellect and 54 mana per 5 with our offset pieces. This gives us some new values that we should be working on, and I will put them into the formula to really count this along with you and to show you how to do all of this stuff by your own. So first off, let's go with the spirit regeneration. When we do the spirit regeneration formula of 13 plus s divided by 4, we get a value of 79.75. This means that this is the spirit regeneration we have per tick. We also take the square root of our intellect, which is 19.1 in this case. We put this into our formula, so we have 79.5 plus 19.1 times 2.5. This equals to 247.125. This is our regeneration per mana per 5 tick. So basically what happens is when we have the square root of our intellect, which you can calculate with a Windows calculator just by pressing the square root symbol, we just get another value that we add on to our spirit regeneration, which we then convert into MP5. We then take this times 0.3, since we now have the 3p set bonus and meditation, which allows us a lot more mana regeneration while we are casting. This gives us 74.1372. I'll round this down to 74. So our MP5 from Spirit is now 74, and we'll have 54 MP5 on our gear. So we roughly have the same amount of regeneration from Spirit as we have from MP5 at this point. So Spirit and MP5 are just about as good. Now that we've wasted a lot of time talking about how to regenerate the mana, it is now time to spend some of that mana to really show what happens. So for this point, I have provided you with a list of all of the spells that a priest will be casting to heal, and I've converted the spell cost from spell per cast into spell per 5 seconds while continuously casting. To break this down in an easy to understand manner, we need to also get another formula into this. This is what I call the mana per second wasting while casting, and that is MPS equals S minus R divided by 5. So S in this case stands for the spell cost, and R stands for our mana per 5 second regeneration. We then divide all of this in by 5 to get the mana per second that we spend while we are casting. The value that we get from this will be the negative amount of mana that we spend every second while we are casting. So in order to calculate the time when we go we take the mana that we have when we have full mana and we divide it by the mana per second wasted. The value that you get out from this is the amount of seconds you have until you go if you start casting and never stop casting until you are Before we continue, I would like to point out that this is not a true representation of the game. I know that you will not be spamming your heals constantly, and I know that a lot of other things are outlying parameters that we can't take into a mathematical basis. So I would like to go through them now before we continue and start looking at the graphs and what heals and what ranks I recommend that you use. Right, so the outlying parameters which will make this a mathematical impossibility to calculate is that 1. There will most likely be other healers with you unless you're in a 5-man dungeon or you're super geared and want to do a 10-man raid. Number 2 is that you do not want to be overhealing. I know that if you have your target and it's got full health and your heal is about to go off, you'll cancel it to conserve your mana. Number 3 is that there are a lot of things that will increase your regeneration rate, such as blessings, judgments, innervates, potions and buff foods and a lot of things. I've not calculated these since if I make a calculation counting Judgment of Wisdom and Blessing of Wisdom, that will not work for the Horde. And if I don't have it in, then it won't work for raiding people on the Alliance side. So just add these numbers in as you get them when you do the calculations. And the last part, and the most important part, is that I have not added any plus healing at all onto our spells. I have actually not even talked about which spells are better to keep a target alive. I will do this in a different video if people want it, but that is a part of the game that you need to actually know intuitively. You need to know how much your spells will be healing. So I'm not talking about that right now. As a result of these 4 points, my mathematical equations are not a true representation of reality, and I know that. But this is to point out what you can do and how long you can sustain your healing if you need to spam heal. It is also to help you guys understand the formulas and how to calculate them. So let us disregard the fact that you will have other healers keeping people alive, which means that you will be cancel casting a lot, which means that you will not spend your mana continuously. Sometimes you'll even kick into full 5-second regeneration, and that will really accelerate your spirit regeneration a lot. With that out of the way, let's now get back to calculating and showing you how long you can sustain your healing. I have added one more thing, and that is chain chugging of major mana potions. This gives you an additional 75 mana per 5 seconds of regeneration on average. So let us now get back to the dungeon set that we provided. In that dungeon set you will have 5686 mana, and if we calculate our MPS, which is mana per second spent, our greater heal will drain almost 200 of our mana. A flash heal will drain almost 230 of our mana per second. Heal will drain 80. Lesser heal will drain 2.5, and prayer of healing will drain 320 mana per second while we're casting it. This means that it will take us 28.5 seconds to go out of mana if we're spam casting greater heal. It will take 24.5 seconds to go out of mana if we cast flash heal. It will take roughly 70 seconds with healing. With lesser heal, we can spam that for 39 minutes in a row without going and prayer of healing will only be available for us for 18 seconds of continuous casting. While doing research for this video, I came across a post by a guy named McAllister on the Nostalrius forums, and he has provided a very good best in slot list that I agree a lot with. So I have used his best in slot gear, and I've provided you the calculations for how long you can spam heal on max ranks with that list. In the best in slot gear that McAllister has provided, we will have 185 mana per 5 seconds while we are casting. And if we convert this into casting spells and MPS, which I have provided you the formula for, greater heal will drain 185 of our mana, flash heal will drain 216, heal will drain 66.5 mana per second, lesser heal will actually give us mana, and prayer of healing will drain 306 mana per second. So spam casting the max ranked great heal will us in 33.9 or 34 seconds. Flash heal will us in almost exactly 29 seconds. Heals will us in 94.5 seconds. Prayer of healing in 20.5 seconds. This is from a mana pool of 6,286 mana. And here comes a very important part of the video and the advice that we'll be giving you guys if you didn't already know. And that is to downrank all of your spells, because in the gear that you have, especially if you get into a best in slot gear such as the one provided by McAllister, we will have a lot of plus healing. I will cover this in another video to show you how this stacks up and when we have different breaking points and a lot of really cool stuff we can do with math. But when we downrank, we can actually heal for a lot longer, and will still provide enough healing to keep people alive. Healing is not a race, because you don't want to overheal a lot, which means that when someone is missing, say 5,000 health, you don't want to heal them for 10,000 of that health, because you will be overhealing for almost the same amount as you are healing, which is very inefficient. Healing is about efficiency and keeping people alive. To prove my point, I've taken the 4 different ranks of heal that we have, and I've broken them down into how long we can spam all of these heals before we go out of mana. This is, in my opinion, the bread and butter heal of the priest. You should have flash heal on your bar, and you should use it to spot heal if someone is about to die. But other than that, you should stick to heal, because it's the most efficient heal that we have. If you cast heal rank 1, we will be losing 15.4 mana per second. This means that we have 408 seconds until we go out of mana, or 6 minutes and 48 seconds. Rank 2 will be costing 32.6 mana per second, 193 seconds until out of mana, which means 3 minutes and 13 seconds. Rank 3 is 49.4, which equals 127 seconds of constant casting, which is 2 minutes and 7 seconds. And again, rank 4 nets us a total loss of 66.6 mana per second, which is 94 seconds of casting until or a minute and 34 seconds. I really hope that you've enjoyed this video that I've provided, that the graphs and all the formulas that I've shown you have been clear, and that my explanations have been thorough enough. If not, please feel free to just send me an email, leave a message on YouTube. You can click on the Reddit link that I've provided to just give me some feedback there if you want to, or if you want to get some further explanations, please just ask for it there. If I've done anything wrong in my math, do tell me so, because I want to improve, and if I want to keep on going further with explaining the deeper understandings of the game and the mechanics and the math behind it, I really need that feedback as well. Please, however, I would like you to kindly stay as positive as possible, and constructive criticism is always way better than just destructive stuff. Thank you very much.